Today, in this video, I want to talk about how Global North exploit the Global South and what can be done to save it. As we all know, with the emergence of capitalism, the world has divided into two distinct areas. First, the Global North, second, the Global South. If we want to understand the exploitation of the Global South, we have to understand the globalization. Globalization can be described as interdependent nations around the globe fostering to free trade. If I want to describe is a more simpler way, multiple nations are competing with each other to provide most cheap labor to the multinational companies of the global north. By doing this, countries, primarily of the third world, are competing with each other that which country can lower the working treatment and which country give less wages. These companies who has pricing power of the commodities in the international market are manipulating prices to destroy the native industry of the third world. With the capital support of the multinational companies, they constantly penetrating into the domestic market, destroying the domestic industry. That's why the population are becoming more and more unemployed. Today, third world is primarily dependent on the small producing farmers. With the international market and the free trade, the price of the crops is constantly lowering. This forces farmers to commit suicide or abandon the field and becoming a refugee, creating more and more inequality around the globe. But when all of this started, who is responsible for this? If we want to understand this, we have to talk about colonization. Now, as we all know, history of colonization, the economy of the countries are shaped as the raw material producer of the global north. After the decolonization, economy of this country remained the same. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the problem is becoming more and more bigger. The penetration of capital into these countries became larger and larger. Now, a new group called International Monetary Funds of IMF is a new tool for capital of the global north to penetrate into the global south and control the economy of these countries and industries. Because of the global north forcefully looting and destroying the native handicraft industries in the history, a total economic restructuring of the global south economy has been done to ensure always to provide raw materials of the global north. These countries has to forcefully cultivate cash crops and other commodity products of the raw materials. These countries depended more and more to the global north for investment, market and machines to bring out themselves through poverty. There is a myth of aid, like we, the developed countries of the global north, want to aid the developing countries of the global south. This type of thinking is very colonialist mentality, racist, and very imperialist narrative. And this type of narrative of development allows the imperialist countries of the global north to whitewash and erase the colonial past of their own wealth creation by looting and destroying the countries of the global south. This development and aid narrative reduce the cause of underdevelopment, poverty, inequality, bad governance, and corruption in these countries. The fact that the wealth creation is completely dependent on looting and destroying these countries is completely erased. Now, what can be done? Countries of the global north should take more responsibility, and scholars of the prestigious universities should discuss this matter a little more. Now, what is the solution? In a website called developmentresearch.eu, one of their article by Christian Kliman called Justice Not Aid of the Global South. He proposed the idea, I quote, drawing on historical and contemporary demands for a more just world order. We propose the following guidelines for EU policies towards the global south. First, many countries of the global south are stuck in suffocating debt traps. This needs to be stopped. These countries spend large portion of their income on interest on loans that have to pay it back many times over. This hampers public investment, education, health, and economy. Second, the plunder and exploitation of the natural resources and labor in the South needs to be ended. This entails awareness of a new form of colonization through, for example, green energy transition that involves new round of intensive resource extraction from global south and a continuous reliance on the cheap labor and demand nature. Third, in order to redistribute global wealth and growing inequality, reparations has to be made. The North has to take responsibility for the wealth it has built up over the century expense of the South. These reparations are not about compensation victimhood. Rather, they continuous the radical claims of a growing number of individuals and movements globally for the social justice targeting tax havens, striving towards a just taxation worldwide was the first step, although still a very modest. First, towards the financial model for reparation. Thus, we need to abolish DG development. Why not place it with Commissioner for Reparation? Lastly, we need to follow up the example of decolonization movement and climate activists who demand more democratic world order. Powerful institutions such as World Bank and EMF and EU prioritize the process of North-centered capital accumulation above human rights, justice and ecological concern. Leaving behind the framework of development aid thus requires a political transition as much as scientific paradigm shift. Only then we can start thinking about a world economy that based on the social justice, human needs rather than the political and economical model that is based on development through exploitation, understating the uneven growth. Only then we can safeguard the future of upcoming generations. With this, I want to say that all the resources and sources I collected is in the description. If you want to take a look, you can take a look. Goodbye and long live the revolution.